Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneurs Show, where we celebrate the innovators driving change in the education industry. At Edison OS, we've worked with over 500 knowledge entrepreneurs to turn their edtech ideas into profitable businesses. Good morning, Gus. Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneurs Show. Thank you so much for taking your time out to be here with me today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Great. Gus, my first question is a pretty easy and a straightforward one for me. What do you do?
So I'm an educator. So I work at a high school in Silicon Valley. I teach mathematics for high school students. Right now I'm teaching Algebra 2 and pre-calculus. And I also have a test prep business, which I started a little over 20 years ago. Also focused here in Silicon Valley, but through Zoom and technology, I've been able to reach students outside the Bay Area, out of state, even out of the country I've done. So yeah, I'm just all about education.
Great. Gus, I was going through your LinkedIn page and there was quite a bit for me to consume.
Yes.
But what I found, what I found interesting was I saw that, you've been with the school for more than a decade and a half now, 18 years, I believe, right?
Right.
And it says teacher and data scientist, which is what caught my eye. I've never heard before a data scientist working as a teacher in a school. So can you talk to us a little about that? Like, what exactly do you do as a data scientist in the school?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So probably about maybe 7 years ago, once my wife and I had our first child, I was trying to think of like ways I could change my career. So I'm not like working two jobs, working as a math teacher and doing test prep. The test prep I really do like, and I could do that like different hours. So I imagine I'll just keep doing that until I'm old and gray. I know people who are actually like in their 70s and 80s who still tutor. But, just the grind of, working as a teacher on your feet and then in evenings, weekends. So I was looking at like ways to maybe transition in. It was actually through my love of sports. We're a big sports area here in the Bay Area, and we have a lot of championship teams. I grew up watching and playing them, so I love analyzing the game, like looking at the statistics and trying to draw inferences and like why certain players will be able to predict results, especially with the sports gambling industry getting really big in the United States with the Supreme Court decision about 5 years ago that made it open for states. So I was at a conference in Boston. It was hosted by MIT. It's called the Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. And when I was there, I was talking to some people. Some people were talking about, there are programs you can do that. That's called data science, where you can learn coding, use statistics. There's a little bit of business, and I just found it fascinating. And so it motivated me to start looking into programs. This was around like 2017, and I applied to a handful of schools, and fortunately got into a really good one, Northwestern. That was all online. And this was 2018. So this is like 2 years before the pandemic started. So I'd already had some experience as a student working remote because I was not going to move to Chicago with my family. I was going to stay here in the Bay Area. So it was all remote. And so that's what kind of sparked my interest in data science. And right when I started that program, one of my administrators, he was my principal for a few years and he moved on to another role within our school. He was looking for a data person to help look at a lot of the data the school collects, a lot of different data projects they want to do to promote retention for employees or to, figure out our financial aid package, look at our college numbers. So he needed somebody that was well-versed with statistics and working with data. And at that time, I started the program. So I started working part-time as a data scientist with Sacred Heart from 2018 to 2020. Then when the pandemic hit, things changed where I was needed more in the classroom. But even then, I've still been doing some side projects for the school. And then outside of my, I stay really busy. I took on another part-time job working for a sports analytics company where they needed some person to do some data work. So, and I've just done just as a hobby. I've just done some data projects. So yeah, that's kind of how I kind of build myself as a data science. I don't do it full-fledged. I'm an educator first, but it's something I kind of have dabbled with over a few years.
Got it, Gus. I'm going to get back to this part in a bit, but now I'd like to kind of go back. And when I was checking, just going through a LinkedIn page, you've been an educator pretty much all along, like 25 years now, right? So you always planned it that way?
Great question. No, I didn't plan it that way. that kind of happened by chance. And this is kind of, you're talking about my personal journey.
Yeah.
So I've always been in love with STEM. Ever since I was a little kid, I loved, math and science, and all throughout high school and college. And but it was in college when I started working as a teaching assistant in the chemistry department at the University of California in San Diego. It was during my third year there. And I also loved teaching too. I loved helping people. And I just did it for fun, and just it made me feel good to be able to help other people understand if they're stuck in a class, because I was there too. So it's that sense of empathy, right, that you need to have as an educator. And so I remember I was working with my students as a teaching assistant, and I just loved it. Like, it was just great. Like, because I had taken the class a year or two prior. I said, "Look, guys, I'm exactly in the seat where you were in. I know what you guys are dealing with." And I didn't know what kind of impact I was having. I thought, okay, I'm just doing the best I can to explain the material. And then when I saw my reviews, I was blown away with how helpful they thought it was. And I remember walking out of that meeting with the evaluator. I'm like, wow, like, this is really, it was like this transformational moment. Like, I may want to pursue a career in this, but of course, teachers don't make much money.
Yeah.
I was a chemical engineering major, where that was one of the highest paid professions coming out of college, about $40,000 a year. It was like 1998, 1999. So I went that pathway, and I worked at Intel up in Oregon for a couple years. And right at that time, Intel was like one of the big companies. There was no Facebook. There was no Tesla. Apple was just getting their feet on the ground again. So, I mean, it was Intel and Microsoft. Those are the two big companies at the time. And both were headquartered in the Pacific Northwest. So that made sense for me to move up there. But even then, I still fell in love with tutoring. I would tutor on the side at Portland State University. And then got into graduate school at Stanford, and I'm from the Bay Area, so it was my chance to move back home, be close to my parents. And at Stanford, I'm not going to lie, it's a great opportunity, right? And I was pursuing a master's in material science and engineering to move forward in the semiconductor industry. And but I always had part-time work. I always wanted to have something on the side, and so there was a tutoring company in downtown Palo Alto, just a few miles. Actually, literally, just you step off the campus here in downtown Palo Alto. And there was an ad I saw on the Stanford campus for a tutoring company located in downtown Palo Alto. They needed tutors, and I applied. They hired me, and I really just took to it. And of course, I'm right in the heart of Silicon Valley, right when the .com boom is blowing up, right? So there was a lot of people with money, people who want to spend to get their kids to good colleges, and people were calling the center asking for me. Then you start thinking, hey, they're paying me $17 an hour. They're charging $70 at the time, which is pretty high. I could do this. I could. And so after a year and a half, I left the company, started my own thing. And right when I started my tutoring company, I was wrapping up my grad program at Stanford. The economy was doing some weird things. 9/11 happened, the war in Iraq. A lot of companies going through hiring freezes. So it was hard to find work, and also my heart wasn't really in it. Also, when I interviewed, I could just tell like I wasn't really as passionate about working as an engineer as I was in tutoring. So I decided to start my own business. And at the time, I was living at home with my parents, so I didn't have rent to pay. And then I remember exactly a year after I started, so February 2003, and then February 2004, I just got slammed with clients. Like, all of a sudden, I had like a dozen or so clients, and sometimes it would go up to 20 or 30 in any particular month. And I've never looked back since. It's always been that way. For the last 20 years. So that's how I kind of got into education, and then slowly started, incorporating more technology when Google Hangouts started becoming more prevalent, and of course Zoom in 2020. And there was times where at some clients, I don't want to get too deep. I want to kind of save this for another question about ed tech, but I did start working with some clients on meeting online. That was probably 2011, 2012. I actually started doing online tutoring through Google Hangouts, and it was a client I had in Whitefish, Montana, of all places. And they heard about me because they were based in San Jose, and they were working with a private college counselor who had worked at my school. And also the other thing, I started working at Sacred Heart in 2005. So after I started the business for a couple of years, then I started working at as a high school math teacher, because a lot of the clients I was tutoring were sitting on the board at this school, and I'm actually at my school right now doing this call. And so I just started doing both. And I was single at the time, so I was like, yeah, I could do both. I could teach, I could tutor, and work 7 days a week. So the kind of are married those two things. And I would do test prep at the school as well. I'd do test prep programs here. But one of the my former colleagues was working with somebody in San Jose, and then they moved to Whitefish, Montana, because they just want to get out of the Bay Area and have a more slower pace of life. But they needed tutors, and they didn't have any tutors in a resort town like Whitefish, Montana. And so they asked, well, would you be willing to work with us? Would you use Google Hangouts? And this kid did really well. And I wound up working with his siblings and then their friends and their family members. And then I just started thinking, I don't really have to be tethered to one area, right? I could, and then the pandemic changed everything. Then figured, wow, I could actually do a lot of this work, like this, face to face on the. So yeah, a little long winded, but that's kind of my journey.
Got it, Gus. Thank you for sharing it. I want to go back to the point where you said, you started working for a company where they were tutoring, and then, a couple of years into it, I think you started your own company.
Right.
Because you saw the potential in it. Now, running a tutoring company as it is a big deal, right? I mean, it takes away a lot of your time, especially when you're also a tutor in the company. I'm sure there must be a reason for you to join a school as a full-time teacher, just more than the money involved there, because you also mentioned about some of your clients on the board of the school. So what's the strategy behind getting into the school as a full-time teacher? Has that kind of helped your business in some ways, or, you must have had a reason? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah. So when I started working at the school, they had a policy that you can't tutor the kids at the school, but I did make an agreement that, I won't tutor kids in academics because I know that's a conflict of interest. I'm teaching math. I'm not going to tutor in math because, I might glance at their tests or something like that. But I said, but the test prep is something I need to maintain, and so so that was good. I made that agreement, and we've had a couple changes of principals, and they've always agreed to this arrangement. But the school sees a benefit too, because if I'm tutoring our own students and they're getting good test scores, they're getting the good colleges, right? And they're getting the good colleges, that increases the profile of the school.
Yeah.
And then we're a private school, right? So we are reliant on paying clients. And yes, we have financial aid, but we're a place that we charge over $50,000 in tuition. We have a huge endowment. We do need paying clients. And so when they see that, this is a school that does send their kids off to good college, even though we bill ourselves as we're a Catholic school, we're all these other programs. But the bottom line, let's just be honest, these families want their kids to go to good college. And so I think the school saw a benefit that I'm helping our own students. And I started doing these elaborate, big test prep programs for all of our 11th grade students, where we have 150 kids per class and almost half would participate. I started doing this probably about 3 or 4 years into my tenure at the school. I got away from it once I got married and had a family because I didn't have the time to keep doing that because I still have to work as a math teacher, still have my own one-on-one business. But that's kind of how that kind of helped working at the school. And then clients would then see, okay, well, I did a test prep class, but I really want one-on-one tutoring, so they hire me as one-on-one, or they just see me and they like me, they are comfortable in my math class, and they want me to work in another capacity with their children. And that's something I still do to this day. Like there are some kids I work with right now for test prep for the fall who I taught last year in math, right? So, so that's something that I think has helped build my business working at school. It's you're around people, you're around your potential clients, and they see the opportunity. They see wow, and these are people who want the kids to go to good colleges, right? So they see an opportunity where we could hire this guy to help our kids. And then of course they talk to their friends. Maybe their friends don't go to the school; they go to another school down the street, but they still want to work with me. So it's just networking, right? You get to know a lot of them, and again, it helped that when I started here, our board's now 30 people. But our board is like maybe a dozen people back then. And I tutored about half of them. I remember I interviewed with our director and I told him some of the families I knew. He's like, "Oh, I guess we have to hire you," jokingly, because I had known some of the more influential parents. So that helps to, if you know the right people, that helps.
Right. Got it, Gus. Because I have another question, just, keeping in mind some of the listeners, who might be in a dilemma about should they work in a school and do this, or should they take this up full time? Because there are a lot of people doing this full time and making a lot of money.
Right.
And stuff. But I don't know how it was back then in 2005 when you took up the job. So didn't you have this thought of, why did you take up the job at school while you could have gone full throttle on your business and may have grown it way bigger, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is maybe my own paranoia, to be honest with you, because sometimes you just wonder, like, would you have enough business to support yourself? Like, because you do need benefits, right? And and especially living in California and even the Bay Area, it's incredibly expensive. So like, healthcare is, and now that I have a family, like, yeah, I definitely need healthcare, right? Retirement, yes, you can contribute, and I do contribute to my own, but you get a retirement plan. I just think just the camaraderie. I think that's and just being around because you can't really tutor. Students during the daytime, so I have time I could. But yeah, I mean, I have thought of that, and there are some people in my area who are around my age who started their business and they've grown great, huge businesses. I think the liability concerns me too, though, because especially when COVID hit, like there are several, like there's one company in particular that's really big here that they open up all these brick and mortar locations, and then all of a sudden they're they're empty, right?
Yep.
Because of COVID. And the people come back, but I think now things have changed where my clients they like meeting on Zoom because they have the convenience, especially with the traffic. If you're in a metropolitan area like in New York, Chicago, LA, Bay Area, it used to take me maybe from where I'm located right now. This is a little bit north of Palo Alto. If I want to get down the mountain group where Google is, yeah, I could get in the car and I'll get there in 10, 15 minutes. But if I wait like maybe a couple hours once traffic picks up, it could take almost an hour, right? So I think people, and especially at 5 o'clock at night when everyone's trying to get home, people are going to sports practices. Um, that's just something. So people like Zoom, and I've had clients like in the past couple of years where maybe they're running a little late or they need a shower and eat dinner after sports. They're like, hey, it's we're supposed to meet 8. Can we meet at 8:15? I'm like, it's all right. Like I'm in my
Yeah.
pajamas watching football on TV. That's not a big deal. Like I'll when you're ready, let me know. I'll hop on the computer. And so it's just that convenience. So I just don't know if that's something I really would want. I'm glad I didn't do it because I didn't want the liability. Because now I think Zoom has changed things for sure. I mean, and
Right.
uh, in a classroom, I wouldn't recommend Zoom. I think that was a total disaster, and I hope that never ever happens again. Especially in California, we're incredibly strict with COVID. Like to have 20 kids and the kids are not interacting with each other because they're kids. So you have to understand that. But for one-on-one, yeah, I mean, it's just you and me. Like you got to pay attention, right? Like we're talking, we're having a
Yeah.
conversation. I think that's changing. So I think that's another. I think it confirmed when COVID hit. Like, yeah, I'm glad I didn't go full-fledged because I just think that would have been kind of a nightmare. And I don't think you really need a physical location, to be honest with you.
Got it, Gus. Gus, you spoke about the 2020 event, but then even since you started in 2003, 2005, you got into school. There was something that happened in 2008 also. There was a financial
Yes.
crisis overall
Yeah.
and
Of
stuff
course.
like that. And I spoke to a few people, who were majorly impacted by this, and that kind of
Yes.
changed courses for them. So how was it for you in that period of transition? Did it even affect you at all? And at that point, did you feel, okay, thank God I'm in this school setup uh, also, apart from your private tutoring?
Yeah, great question. I'm kind of unique because I'm in an area that's incredibly affluent. I'm in
Mm,
Atherton. My school is located in Atherton, California. It's a 94027 zip code. It's one of the richest zip codes in the country. And so a lot of my clients were pretty much recession proof and they really wanted to focus on education. They see the importance of it. So I was lucky in that regard that a lot of my clients. But I will say my business didn't experience quite the same trajectory. Like from 2005, 2006, there was growth. 2006, 2007, there was growth. So it did stagnate a little bit because there might be more like middle income families that figure, okay, maybe we don't do some tutoring or maybe we don't do as much. But I wouldn't say there was like a huge downturn, especially because, but again, it just depends on the area you're in and your clientele base. I mean, fortunately for me, being in Silicon Valley, and the clients I was working with, they were not terribly impacted. And again, they see the value. A lot of, if you're going to prioritize something, if you're going to maybe you don't do a big vacation, but you're still going to prioritize your kids' education. And when they see they have a good quality, tutor coming to the house, working with their kids, they'll make it happen.
great, great. Good for you, I think. Being in that zip code, as you said. And here's a mindset question, Gus. I don't know, I mean, if it applies to you, but you said at the time in the late 90s or the early 2000s, you were working with Intel, and the only
Mm-hmm.
other company that was as big was Microsoft. Another company was just taking off. Some of the companies that are big today weren't even existing back then. But when you transitioned into the tutoring and the school thing, of course, you were passionate about teaching. were there moments of FOMO? Would you, kind of go back and think, what if I had been in Intel and stuff like that? Did you have
Sure.
that? If you had, how did you deal with that?
Um, yeah, with Intel, Intel, it's interesting because the income I was making, both teaching and tutoring, actually was more than working as an engineer full time. And
Right.
we do work as an engineer full time. Like, it does suck the life out of you, especially a company like Intel. I remember when I was working in Portland, Oregon, was research and development, and there were several colleagues that were 10, 15 years older than me. They had already been twice divorced. I mean, they carried pagers with them, which is funny. Like, they're because the factory never stopped, right? It worked 24/7. And so if they were like, and these are the really big shot engineers who had a PhD, and they were in charge of a particular tool in the factory. And like, if at 2 a.m. something went wrong, they're getting paged in the middle of the night. And so I know that if I had stayed that course, I don't know if I would have been able to do the tutoring thing, because I think it would just consumed too much of my time. Whereas teaching's a little more in a box in a way. It's like, there's more structure. Like, hey, we start at 8:30, we end by 2:30. You got the summers off, you got winter break, you got Thanksgiving off, you got spring break, you got other breaks. So there's a little bit more routine or structure. I mean, it's funny because sometimes I'll tell my friends, like, yeah, I'll meet you at like 2:25 to, and like, say 2:30. But that's how I live my life, because it's so by the minute, right? So I think it made it easy for me to do both. So I didn't really feel I was missing out, because, and also I just felt like I was meeting more people. Like, it was just more interesting. Like, it's a lot of the same people. A lot of, and I'll just stereotype, a lot of engineers are quite introverted. And I think that's another reason why I did that transition when I was at grad school at Stanford, where a lot of my classmates were quite introverted, whereas I was just meeting all these interesting, people, different stories, and I've worked with thousands of kids, and like my parents, they're older now, they live in the area, but like, they'll go to a doctor's appointment and they'll like meet somebody that knows me. They see the last name, like, oh, you must know Gus from Sacred Heart, and hey, that's my son. And that's just kind of cool. Like, and I mean, I've been travel, we travel. Like, one time we were in, my wife and I were in Maui, and I kind of joke, we'll see if we run into somebody. We did run into someone at the Costco on the way out of town, right
Right.
behind us. And that's just kind of neat. Like, that's why I don't feel like I miss out, because it's that community that I don't think you get so much working in tech, right? I mean, that sense of community that when you work at a school, it's just so great, and it just expands. I mean, yes, if I had to maybe worked at Google, I don't know how it would fit in there. Sure, I've had millions of dollars. Sometimes I do think about that. Like, yeah, what if I start Facebook in 2006? I don't know what I've done for them, because I, didn't, I'm not a coder. I mean, you think that. I mean, you see people here who, and now those companies do hire people in so many different disciplines and facets. But yeah, but I haven't really, because I really have enjoyed the community. I think that just carries so much value.
This is great stuff. Uh, just to have this perspective from quality of quality of life point of view,
Mhm.
I think is great. Thank you for sharing this, Gus. Gus, another thing that I want to touch upon is the evolution of the mode of delivery of your teaching, because you started,
Yes.
again, it's been a couple of decades and more, and there's been so much of transition. For example, you said you started online in Skype way back in 2011. Zoom, I think, came
Yes.
at around 2014. And how was it before Skype? Where was it like, did you used to go to the student's place and teach, or did
Hmm.
you have a common place where the students would come in? And how
Hmm.
was your first time pitching online classes and stuff? If you can like walk us through this.
Yeah, actually, I forgot Skype. Thank you for reminding, because actually that was the first, and then it's Google Hangouts after that. And Skype
Right.
was, you had to pay money, and it was sometimes but Google Hangouts is unstable too. But yeah, no, yeah, a lot of times, yeah, I go to the kid's house. That's how it worked. When I started in 2003, I would get in my car and drive, and just go from house to house. That's how I did it. And then when I started working at my school, I didn't really think to use my school as a location, but after a couple of years, when I started doing that, and people were comfortable with that. They thought that was because maybe they're on campus for something, or they're nearby, and also allowed me to kind of stack, because that's the other thing too, is that when you have to drive, you lose that time, right? If you really want, from a business perspective, right, you want to be able to stack appointments. And especially once I had a family, like, I have to be mindful about that. For example, on Sundays, I just do Zoom calls, and that way, at least I can step away for a few minutes, help with the kids. So I think, as someone who's like more middle age and wants to do this, I think you want to be able to think like, how do you, get as much output, right? How do you, be efficient with your business and not get in your car? Because that's a problem, right? Like if you're commuting back and forth. Libraries are good too. If you don't, one thing I never have the students come to my house. I've had a handful, like they were like, male students. They were like, older, and they're like, it was in my wife's home. So, but that's the one thing you never want to do. It just gets kind of messy. But yeah, I would go you can meet at a library. You can meet at another location, a coffee shop. They could be loud, but and libraries have to be careful because some people want to be quiet. But you could, there are a lot of different ways you could do it. You don't have to go to someone's house. But initially, that's how it worked. And I still do that sometimes. I mean, like some clients, if they live close together, I could be somewhat strategic about it. But if it's like, 6 o'clock, I'm going to have to sit in my car for 40 minutes to get to your house. Yeah, it's not going to work. And we have Zoom now. Like it doesn't make sense.
Got it. And the online teaching happened first time because, in the past few years, online teaching has kind of become the norm, especially because of the pandemic and stuff like that. But before that, there had to be a strong reason. So did you start doing online classes only because of the geography in the first place? Somebody outside of your country wanted to learn from you. That must have been the starting point. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. That was, and again, that was through some people in Montana. And then I have to look at my roster, but I know there are other people I worked with, some like near Lake Tahoe in Nevada, which is about 4 hours from the Bay Area, which is a popular ski destination, summer destination. There's some just a friend of mine had a cousin living in New York, and so they wanted to meet. Then a family member, they had like someone who was living in Hong Kong. So yeah, I've done that. So it's word of mouth, obviously, and people sometimes they say, "Wow, this guy's really good," and we could go to someone local, but we're going to go with this guy because he has really helped our friends, and they really vouched for him. So so it's really geography, right? And then once I started working with people in San Jose, and then when the economy started recovering after 2008, around like 2014, 2015, I had some clients in the South Bay in San Jose, and again, it used to be really easy to drive down there. Now it just takes forever because the area has grown. Yeah, we just do that too because I said, well, you could drive up, but they don't want to drive up. I could drive down. I don't want to drive down. So they have to jog, but even though that's 20 miles, not hundreds of or thousands of miles,
right,
or time zone differences, but you still do it because of the convenience.
Yeah, I think now it's like it's a no-brainer to kind of travel or spend your time on traveling and stuff like that when it's become full-blown online at this point. Gus, another thing that I want to touch upon is you said teaching came naturally to you because organically rather, you didn't have to kind of pick up skills and stuff like that. You started at a point where there was no pressure on you to kind of teach and stuff like that. But for you,
right.
When I've spoken to a lot of teachers, for some it's a performance, and then they say that they try and deliver the same content in different ways to different students and stuff like that. How is it personally for you teaching? Because it can get monotonous at times. How do you kind of make sure that you're not bored, and do you experiment with your teaching methods? Do you add in humor and stuff like that? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I had never gone through any formal training as a teacher before starting here. So at the private schools, you don't need a credential, whereas at the public school, I would have to go back and I don't want to do that, but you have to go back. And again, I'm happy at the private school because the pandemic really showed the big difference in quality and resources. And I felt awful for my public school counterparts because it was just a total nightmare. So yeah, you don't need a credential to work at a private school. And the Forsyth School took a chance on me. They knew I had tutoring experience, and I did a demo class, and they really liked the presence I had. So that's how I kind of knew that, okay, maybe this is a good fit. But as time passed, you do get bored. You do also want to make sure you're are using the best practices, right? Are there other ways I could reach to my students? And working at a school like this that is quite affluent, has a lot of resources, we do promote professional development. We take professional development very, very seriously here. And so in some ways, if you count up all the different workshops and conferences I've been to, it would add up to a credential grad program. And I never even took the credits. Like you can see, you can get grad school half credit. Like if I added up, I probably would have enough. So, and then there have been times where like I've been to different workshops where I had this aha moment. A big one was we actually had one that was in-house. Someone came to our campus and they talked about something called flipped teaching. And that was something I was very passionate about. This is, probably 2010, 2011. And he talked about how, like, instead of you lecture and then kids do problems, they do homework at home, you flip the paradigm, right? Where, hey, they come to class doing problems and at home they watch the lecture. And that's when you can start and that's when YouTube started becoming more popular, right? And on all the screencasting software, I can't remember what software, it might have been Camtasia. I can't remember what, now I just do my recordings on Zoom, but so that was, that professional development was huge because it just blew my mind. Like, wow, like I can actually use more of my time in class to actually interact with students instead of just me talking. They're listening. It was too passive. Yes, you took the lecture and put it online, and that's still a passive experience. But at least it's there where they need to rewatch it if they get stuck on something. But that would be in the homework space, and I still do that to some extent with my classes today, where I have lots, or what I'll do is I'll record my lessons in class and share it so that at least they could watch it at home, or if someone misses class. And so that was just mind blowing because we were having kids missing class all the time for sports. And again, we're a really big sports school here too. So like our kids are traveling to other parts of the country or up and down the state of California, and they're missing class, or kids just get sick, especially with COVID. So I think leveraging the technology is huge, and I was able to become well versed with that because of the opportunities my school provided. Because we have those means. Like for me to go to a conference, I've been conference in San Diego, New Orleans, Chicago, really great places. That's $3,000. To fly me out there and fly other people too, not just me, but
Right.
per person about 3,000. Hotel, airfare, car, per diem for food, the conference fees. But fortunately, I've been blessed to work at a school that has and our parents and our board understand that and they fundraise for it. Like, so we know we're going to get better teachers as a result. So that would be another thing. Like, if people are looking to get an education, to really think about that. Like, think about who can actually, to help you with professional, because you need to do it. For 20 years, what I'm doing now is way different than I was doing 20 years ago. And in between, I was also doing different things. So yeah, to answer your question, definitely I've had to change it up, but I've been blessed to have school that's got some pretty deep pockets to make that happen.
Got it, Gus. Gus, another thing that I wanted to touch upon was, sorry, just give me a second, please.
Oh, yeah, take your time. No rush. You're good.
I was just having a thought, just lost it towards the end. Oh yeah. So as a teacher, right? Mostly people think it's about kind of helping the students with their subjects and stuff like that. But it's not just that when it comes to students, right? Because you just can't say, you know what, I've done my job, but then students have a lot of other problems as well, apart from just teaching. So how do you deal with that? Say, for example, it could be, off late, there's been, test anxiety and, ADHD and, all these sort of things. And you're someone, who's in that state where you get a chance to address a large group of students as well, and then you do one-on-one as well. So how the exchange of experience from one place to another place happens, if you can share some of your experiences from that.
So you're talking about connecting with students outside the classroom, outside of academics. Is that the question? Or
yeah, something like that. Although the relationship is of a teacher and a student,
right?
If the student is not completely present in the class, the student is having other problems. So do you kind of intervene, or
yes.
What is the kind of contribution that you do?
I understand the question now. No, definitely. That happens, and it's tricky because some kids may not want to talk to you about it, and it's very private. Usually, sometimes when I have concerns, again, we're very blessed to be at this school where we have lots of counselors and advisors, and so sometimes I'll, not most of the time, if I have a concern, I'll reach out to the advisor and say, I have a concern, And then, and that's the liaison where they then can talk to the parents. Or if I have a good relationship with the parents, if I've worked with one of the older children, or we just have a really good connection, I'll reach out and say, hey, there's a concern that I'm having, and just kind of leave it at that, and then see what they say. And then sometimes they'll just be very transparent or very open, like, oh, we're going through a divorce, or so and so is like, is terminally ill, and we always kind of say, look, we're very empathetic. We do maintain confidentiality. And so there's some who will open up. But what I've also done too is I've kind of planned myself, outside of like the teaching, because we have other chaperone duties. Like either we if you go to high school dances, or you could watch football games or basketball games. I like to participate in the retreats. So I didn't do it right in the beginning of my tenure at Sacred Heart, but later on I started participating in some of our spiritual retreats. And I was just blown away with just how impactful. I know hearing some of my colleagues, they speak about their personal experiences and some of the trouble they've gone through, and how they were able to get out of that, and how they relied on their spirituality to get them through whatever they're dealing with. And I've spoken at those too, and I've been one of those adult leaders. And then I've also led small groups where I'm facilitating, and you let the kids air out whatever they're dealing with. And so I think that's how I've been able to forge a good connection outside the classroom. And then when I see them on campus, like we maintain the confidentiality. They know I know what's going on. They know what's going on with me. But but I think that also kind of builds that trust. And then of course when they feel comfortable, their friends say, oh yeah, so my friend's comfortable with this teacher. So, they probably have heard that, I spoke at these retreats. And I've also just spoken to the greater school about like just my own spirituality journey, and just other things in my life that I've gone through with the greater school community too. And so, so I think that also has built trust. I think within my third or fourth year, so my family's Muslim. I'm not practicing so much now, but I was practicing more as a younger adult. And I was talking about Ramadan and fasting, and the students were so enthralled with hearing about something that's different from what they're used to, and that was so authentic. And I think that's a key thing, being authentic. I think the kids will eat it up. You really will forge, in the classroom, but also outside too. If you're just your authentic self, I think that could help forge a really good connection with you and your students.
Got it, Gus. Gus, times have been evolving, so I'm just gonna ask this question from a current worldview, status, and then probably go back and compare how it was when you started off. Like marketing, right? I don't know if is one of the big problems for you, given the unique position that you are in right now. But do you really have to market when it comes to your private tutoring? Or how do you get your students mostly from?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's something I thought in the beginning, like, oh wow, like how do I advertise for myself, right? And one thought was, well, maybe I'll go to the local schools and advertise in school newspapers. And I'll just say that was a total waste of money. I mean, yes, you help the school out, you help the school newspaper, so there's nothing wrong with that. So I shouldn't say it's a total waste of money. That's kind of harsh. But in terms of getting clients, no, it didn't help one single bit. Yeah, you could also advertise like in the local newspapers in your area. But the bottom line is that, this is a very intimate thing. Like you're bringing someone to your house, working with your kids. You really want word of mouth, right? And you worry. I mean, you hear about like all these weird things that like all these sexual things that happen, especially with like the Catholic priests. That all that happened in the United States. It's you really want the word of mouth. I mean, you really want like I mean, myself, I have 3 kids, and once they're old enough, like for example, my oldest, he plays piano, but it's someone from down the street we heard about through our neighbors, right? So yeah, I'm comfortable, and I could leave him at her house and walk away and come back and get him because I know he's gonna be safe, right? So I think that's, I mean, unless it's brick and mortar and you hear about it, maybe you could advertise or do online advertising. Like I had one guy from Yelp. I don't know how that happened, but or maybe I put my business on Yelp, and then he started reaching out to me, wanted to me to spend more money, and I was playing hardball with him. I was like, well, tell me why I should do this, and I said, well, like I was using a restaurant as an example. Like, well, restaurants, yeah, he said, well, people have to eat. Yeah, of course, everyone has to eat. Not everyone needs tutoring. It's a very special thing. So, yeah, I just think a lot of it is, to be honest, it's word of mouth. But you do want to forge those connections. Like when I'm done working with a family, it's not like okay, that's it. I don't talk to you ever again. I still try to maintain contact with them. Like, for example, in the summertime, I'll shoot emails to old students, say, hey, I just want to see how you're doing. They're off to college. Maybe if they're the youngest and they have no more kids. Yeah, I just want to know how things are going. Or some families, like, we still keep in touch. Like maybe we meet up for coffee or we see each other at sporting events in the area. So maintaining that connection, I think, is huge. Because sometimes if they see an email from me, like, oh, okay, yeah, we do remember, working with Gus a couple years ago. Oh, I have a neighbor down the street who needs some help. And then they remember me because I made that connection, right? Sometimes they just remember me because they didn't forget about me, and they just, I'll, like a good example. I had a client reach out to me this weekend, and this is and he heard about me through a mother. Their kids are already married now. Like, so it's nice that this woman still remembered me and suggested me. But I think sometimes you have to just keep contact. Like, I have some families on my Christmas card list where I just constantly keep them on that list. So you have to just kind of remind people, like, hey, remember me? Like, without being too pushy about it.
Right.
Just be strategic. Like in the summertime, like, hey, just want to see how things. Like, I'm not going to send a newsletter. I thought of maybe doing that. Like, some people might do that too, and that could work. I thought of doing a newsletter every month. To be honest with you, I hate those things. That's a strong word, but I just unsubscribe to them because I'm not interested. So I think that just could be, you just have to be mindful about that.
Right. Would you say, over 20, 25 years, if one thing about marketing is constant, is word of mouth, right? That in
Right.
your experience, nothing is better than word of mouth, at
Right.
least, one-on-one tutoring space.
Yeah. Word of mouth is essential. I mean, and so it forces me to always do a good job, because if I don't do a good job, right, or if if I'm like late to appointments constantly, if I'm not like, after each session, I always give feedback and give homework if I don't do that, or if I'm not totally present, if I seem absent-minded. Yeah, those are all things that could hurt you, right? And there have been a few instances where, like my father was sick in the hospital, and my mind wasn't all there, and at one client, like that was a little upset that, like, okay, well, you showed up a little bit late, or you seem a little distracted. And I said, look, this is what I'm dealing with right now. Like, I'm sorry. Again, it's very, very rare that happens, but it was a reminder that, yeah, like, I have to keep doing high quality work, and whatever you're dealing with in life, you check it at the door. Don't bring your baggage with you. Like anything in life, right? And
Yep.
you put your best self forward, because, yeah, in order for me to get more business, I have to have good quality. And so word of mouth is absolutely, and it's like that. And if you need like a good lawyer, if you need a good doctor, if you're looking to do like maybe some physical therapy, who's a good physical therapist, it's all word of mouth. I mean, you really want, and especially something that's intimate as
Right.
education, word of mouth is essential.
Got it. Gus, this private tutoring, your company is called IV Advantage, and
Yeah.
it's about 2 decades old now. Is it just you, or you've got a team? Because there's so much that you do. It's not just tutoring, right? You
Mhm.
have curriculum development. There's
Mhm.
so much more to a company. So if you can walk us through how the company grew from where you started and stuff like that.
Yeah, it started as a one-man band when I did it, and then slowly I started adding some tutors. And in fact, I think it was during my second year at Sacred Heart. It was one of my colleagues. She knew somebody who was at grad school at Stanford, in the education program, who was new to the area and looking to tutor as well. And he was like me, similar age. He's an English guy, actually, and I'm a math guy. So it was kind of a perfect marriage, because I really wanted someone to help develop more of the verbal component of our SAT program and ACT. And of course, I was doing all the math stuff. And so we joined forces, and we're still friends to this day. He now lives in Vancouver, Canada, in British Columbia. And but we still, I give him clients, he gives me clients. And so when he came on board, he was working at a school in San Jose, and he knew of a lot of the younger teachers who were also hungry and looking for business. So I started hiring them, and they started teaching classes at my school, and then I started using them to send out to other clients. And then I kind of got this idea, well, but the problem is that tutors come and go. A lot of times they do it for a little while, they're not too interested. And I got this idea, I have this tutoring factory called Stanford University. That's just 5 minutes from here. I call it a tutoring factory because you've got grad students there who are stuck there. I hate saying stuck, but they are there for 5 to 6 years because they're in a doctorate program and they're not making much money.
Right.
They're on a very tight stipend and they do need extra cash.
Right.
And they're good tutors, and also they're responsible because they're usually going to be in their mid-20s. Like the tutoring center I worked at when I was in grad school in downtown Palo Alto, myself and another guy, we were only grad student tutors. Everyone else were undergrads. That's changed now. Like in order to work as a private tutor for any of the big companies here, or just on your own for people to take you seriously, you need to at least have a bachelor's degree, sometimes even a master's. So that has changed. So I thought to myself when I was in my 20s, am I going to still be in my mid 40s? And here I am in my mid 40s, I'm still tutoring. But going back to the building a team, yeah, I mean, Stanford made a lot of sense because families are going to be comfortable. You say, oh, I got a Stanford grad student. Oh, wow. Like they know it's, and also they know that person's vetted too, because, this is someone that's going to be, most likely if they're working with, students at Stanford, they've probably gone through like background checks, so they feel comfortable with that. Or if they had worked at my school, did test prep classes, they had to go through background checks too in order to work with students, right? They were forced to do that. It's California law. So I had that for a while, and then and I hate like turning away business, so I would get booked, and I have other people reach out. So I want to hand it off to other people, and even if I take a small profit or don't take a profit, I just want to make sure I'm helping people. When COVID hit, things changed, and people had different priorities, and there's a lot of teacher burnout. So it's kind of gone back to just me now, and because I could do a lot of the stuff online, I could stack appointments, and I do charge a higher rate now too. I've done this a long time. But I still have a handful of English tutors who do work for me, and some app I could lean on. So I've kind of got away from trying to build like a network. It's kind of gone back to more just myself. It's more of a lifestyle business. That's kind of how I would bill it, not so much to scale. But yeah, I mean, I have somewhat scaled up, but in some ways, I'm comfortable doing as a lifestyle business right now.
Got it, Gus. And especially your school knows that you have the test prep business on the side. So Are there teachers working with you? Are they sometimes interested to kind of teach? Do you get requests from them? Do you hire your
yeah, I do. Yeah. I've had a handful. Definitely have asked, and a lot of times I'll sit down with them and I'll kind of tell them what they could do to kind of start their own thing. And I tell them like how I got started is I worked for a tutoring company, right? And when I was working for this tutoring company, I got to know some clients there. And actually, one of the board members who got me this job at Sacred Heart was also one of my. I was working with their kid at this tutoring center, and then the tutoring center decided to kind of change their model, focus more on college counseling, and these families were calling, asking me that I was no longer there, so they got a hold of me and said, and then because of those handful of clients that I forged a relationship with, and it wasn't like I was poaching their business, they reached out to me. So you also want to be careful because sometimes you have to sign these agreements that you're not going to steal, and that makes sense. But they reached out to me and they're like, yeah, so we started working. And so that's why I tell some of my colleagues who want to get into tutoring, like, go work for a small company that might have more business, or I'll give you a client. But, ultimately as you, you plant the seed and it grows, right? Grows into a forest. And so I think you just have to start small and do good work and be patient. I think just, it's not going to happen overnight. And, as long as you do good work, people talk and you get business.
Got it, Gus. Gus, since 2020, the virus thing happened and all, you said, it's more to, it's more back to more, it's just you who's doing the IB Advantage company and business. How many students at any given point do you engage with? What's the max that you get to engage with?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, there is a capacity, obviously, but there are times where I've pushed 30 students at any given time. especially like during the summer times where you have, I could see kids, at 9 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning. Um, Not this past summer, that didn't happen, but there have been some summers where, especially when before colleges went test optional, which is something we should definitely
Yeah.
talk about because that's totally changed the landscape of test prep for sure. But prior to that, yeah, I mean, I would have lots of students, but even when the pandemic hit, um, somewhat ironically, even though some businesses like restaurants and hotels had a huge downturn in business, mine did really well because kids weren't going to, or kids had weird schedules where, okay, maybe it's asynchronous. And so I was seeing a lot of students at like 9 or 10 o'clock on Zoom. And then at former students, well, I say former because they're still students, but students that worked in their high school and they went off to college and they were taking maybe a calculus class or a chemistry class and they're stuck. And yes, they're paying thousands of dollars in college tuition. They go see the professor or the teaching assistant, but they still want to work with me because they're comfortable with me. And now that you have Zoom, I didn't have this in the 90s when I went to college. I wish I did because like we would not go to class and we were like staying up all night studying for a physics quiz and we needed help because we didn't know what's going on. And I wish I had that, but they have it now, right? I mean, so they say, hey, I could talk to a tutor who I built a relationship with 3 or 4 years in high school, and I could see them also, because they're in college, right? So it doesn't have to be after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It could be
Right.
at what I mean. Some students who are like on the East Coast or Central Time Zone, I'll wake up at 6 in the morning for them. Let's say, okay, they want me at 8 o'clock their time. That's fine. I'll wake up for you, and so that enables me to squeeze in more students. But on average, like during the school year, yeah, it's about 20 students I'll tend to work with, and after I put my kids down for bed, I can see them at 8, 9 o'clock. I can see them on Sundays. It's pretty flexible now, especially Zoom makes it much, much easier. And again, you don't have to physically be in the same room. But yeah, it could push up to 25 to 30 sometimes if just depending on the season and what students' needs are.
Got it, Gus. Gus, and one of the topics that I was going to bring up, Britain, you spoke about it. I think now some of the universities have made it not compulsory for the students to take SAT or
Right.
ACT. How has this impacted your business?
Yeah, quite heavily actually.
Okay.
But what's done, you pivot, right? You transition, and that's why it's so important to have a STEM background. It was a stark reminder of like it's good to major in STEM. It's good to have several sources of revenue or revenue streams.
Right.
Because like if you look at restaurant owners or who own hair salons, that's all they knew, and all of a sudden that revenue stream went to zero, right? And these are not people who studied. Maybe they studied STEM. I don't know if they studied STEM, but when not as many people were interested in doing the SAT, and I had some clients like, we're going to go to like maybe a local state college, maybe not a elite private school, where even though it's optional at the elite private schools, they still want to do it because it's very competitive. Like if you want to go to Stanford, Harvard, yeah, I mean, you're still going to do it because people are paranoid. They want a test score to at least put. But if you're going to like say, San Francisco State University, that's has high admissions rate, and you don't need, then yeah, why would you take it, right? But what it means is that the grades become more important, right? So what are the colleges going to look at? The GPA carries more weight, and not just GPA, but also the rigor of your curriculum. Are you taking hard classes? If you just took a bunch of easy classes, got A's in them, that doesn't look as good. So you're going to have to make sure that you place into higher class, or you're getting good grades so you can take or stay in the higher classes. So now all of a sudden they want tutors to help them for the math and science class. So it's really been a pivot more than anything else where I'm working with a lot of students for their math classes, their science, making sure they're staying on top, make sure they're understanding, giving them extra practice. But it's kind of, the tide is starting to turn a little bit now, especially with the digital SAT. I think there's a lot of interest. Some colleges, I mean, I know MIT is MIT, but they've required it. So I don't know if that's going to happen eventually. Like some colleges might realize, they look at the data like, oh geez, like we really need to bring this test back because this data is helpful. I mean, I highly doubt in California, like the University of California system, they've been anti-testing for the longest time. And when COVID hit, that was their golden goose. Like, we are going to drop this test, and no one's going to complain. And you couldn't, because schools are closed, and the teachers union, they didn't want to proctor the exams. They were being very tricky. But but you pivot. I mean, yeah, but yes, but in terms of if you look at like the percentage of my business that's test prep, that has gone down for sure. But you pivot, and then sometimes when you work with students for academics, they'll want to do. They may want to squeeze in some test prep, and I've been a little more strategic about like to say, look, you're not going to do the SAT 4 times. I have
Right.
one student I'll never forget. Right before the pandemic hit, when I was tutoring her, she had worked with somebody else, then she wanted to work with me, and she was going to take it for the 4th time. And I was like, whoa, like that's just insane. Those days are gone. I mean, there's no reason. Yes, you want to have a test score that you, but it's really more like one and done, or maybe do it a second time. But those days of doing it, so many times are long gone, because it's just not as critical to the whole portfolio you show in your college application.
Right. Got it, Gus. Gus, before I touch upon digital essay, at you work with 30 students at any given point in time, and then would split, some of them are test prep, some of them are academic. What is the average duration with each of the students that you work with?
Great question. Excellent question. For test prep, I aim for about 3 months, and that's usually the sales pitch. I mean, that's the other thing you talk about marketing, right? Once you have a parent talk to you or reach out to you, then you got to reel them in, right? Like hook, line, sinker. I'm not a fisherman, but I like using those analogies. Not sure if I messed that one up, but anyway, but you got to reel them in, right? And so, definitely, when part of my sales pitch is I don't want to tell the families like, oh, I'm going to work with the kid for over a year. I want to make sure it's efficient. I want to make sure they know, like, look, we're going to get in and we're going to get the job done. And I don't, and I just saw one of your questions, like something that you want to avoid telling the parents. I don't tell that it might take 6 to 9 months. I mean, I do tell them, like, if they do ask it, or I might say, like, sometimes that might happen, but I try to say, like, that on average, I try to aim for about 3 months, like 12 sessions. And actually, if I do the math, if I go back and look at all my client list, that's usually what the average has been. But it's a relationship, right? You want to build that relationship, and you want the frequency. And I tell them, like, look, we can't just okay, we'll meet, then we don't meet for 3 weeks. Like, we're gonna, and maybe we could be flexible every week. Maybe Monday doesn't work for me. Wednesday was better for you. The bottom line is we have to meet once a week, an hour each time. It's kind of like if you're working out, you're trying to get in shape. I use that analogy, like, look, if I'm not just going to go run 5 miles and then not run for another 2 weeks. No, you got to keep up with it, right?
Right.
So yeah, it's about 3 months, and we try to time it appropriately. We're like, look, you're going to take the test in November. Great, let's start like around now, like August, and get you ready. COVID really made that difficult because the tests kept getting canceled. I had, especially in California, it might have been different in other parts of the world or country, but I had kids that were registered to take it somewhere in California. Then all of a sudden, test site canceled because they're afraid of having too many kids, or they couldn't find proctors. And I had kids who had to fly out of state to take it. It was probably one of the craziest times I've ever experienced in my career as a test prep tutor. So that was a challenge for sure. If you're, because I know you're talking about challenges here, but yeah, 3 months. And then if it's academic, we try long term. We want to try to stay on the whole year, like from September till June. And sometimes we even do some work during the summer to kind of keep their skills sharp. A lot of times when you do work for academics, you want to keep the client for the whole time, for like 3-4 years. I mean, you build that relationship, and so that's what I've been trying to do more now,
Right.
to have more longer term. Whereas before but the joke I'd have with the family is like, you want to get rid of me. Like, it's a good thing to get rid of me because it means I did my job. Like, we got to where you need to go. We completed it. It's like you hire a contractor. You don't have a contractor house for 2-3 years. You want to remodel your house and enjoy your house. That's it. But with academic tutoring, that's a little bit more relationship, longer term. Yeah. So it just depends.
Got it, Gus. Gus, when it comes to test prep, does your onboarding of students include a diagnostic test, based on which you kind of plan there? Right.
Yeah, I mean, and again, the analogy I use when I do the sales pitch with my parents who are looking to hire me as a tutor, and sometimes they'll just go with me, but I just tell them anyway, like, look, it's like a doctor, right? Like, you go see your primary care doctor, like maybe your back is hurting you, your knee's hurting you. You got to go through some tests, right? Or maybe you might have something intestinal or something more internal, heart, whatever, lungs. Yeah, you got to go through tests, diagnostics, just to figure out what's going on. Then you focus on the specific need, right, or a specific way to solve the problem. And that's exactly what I do. I don't. Back in the day when I first started, I kind of did the whole 9 yards. It's like, let's do the whole thing. We'll go through A through Z. Now it's like, look, let's be very specific. Do a practice test. Okay, great. You have a great math score. Okay, verbal needs help. More specifically, maybe it's a particular grammar rule you're not catching, or for going back to math, everything in math looks good, but maybe you had a bad geometry experience. Maybe, and even tell me, yeah, I didn't learn much of geometry, or I did geometry during the pandemic, didn't learn anything. So then we focus on those specific skills. But I need to do the practice in the beginning to know that. Like I don't, or if they've done one recently, then I'll look at that. They did an SAT officially, and they have the results, and they actually have the test questions. Great, but it makes my job harder if I don't have that data. And so, and kind of falling back on my data science background, I'm still using that, right? I'm trying to leverage the data to inform me of how I could best help the client. Like that's how I say, this is the benefit. Like I need that data. I need you to sit down and do the test. And then, of course, after we work on whatever we need to work on, then we reassess, right? Then we do another practice test. And if they solve the problem, but they still have a few more weeks, then we just try to fine tune and maintain that level. But absolutely have to diagnose in the beginning.
Got it, Gus. Gus, probably want to conclude the conversational part of this podcast by just touching about one aspect of this whole tutoring thing, right? The tech tools that are involved.
Yeah, totally.
And especially when there is digital SAT, everything goes online, and it's no more pen and paper and stuff. So has your style of diagnostic tests with students have changed? Is it like completely online now? And that's one thing. But apart from that, what are your major tools that keep your online tutoring
Great question.
business?
So I am looking into getting some digital SAT programs or software that I can use for my, because the papers, paper's still good. I think there's still some use for that. If I see there's a certain skill, like if they need to work with quadratic functions or need to work on how to identify misplaced modifiers, stuff like that. Yeah, I'm going to give them some drills and like worksheets and just to work on the skills. I think that's okay. But practice tests, yeah, I'm not doing paper practice tests anymore. That's done. It has to be online, because like, for example, and this is why I think my grad school experience, also because I went back and got a data science degree online, I had to do the GRE. Like I had to, my GRE from 20 years ago is no longer valid. I had to do it again, and that was on a computer. I had to go to a test site, and it was adaptive too, which this new SATs, and I have some thoughts about that we could talk about in a few minutes of how I think that's going to be impactful and how we need to be mindful about that. But definitely I'll have to use some digital SAT platform for practice tests. I can't do paper anymore. But in terms of the tools I use, I still love YouTube. I think if kids need to watch a video lesson on a particular topic they're not getting, I think you could you could curate. You don't have to, or I make my own stuff too sometimes. But Zoom, obviously, that's another online tool that to meet with students. Google Docs or Google Drive in general. Like if I have like some kids who I've worked with for a while, or they want to do things a little more independently, or maybe like I had one kid who was in Europe for a few weeks this summer. I said, look, I know it's gonna be hard for you to meet. You're gonna be really busy. Let me put all my stuff on a Google Drive for you, and I'll give you a schedule. So I create a Google Doc, a Google Sheet. I share it, and this way you can share it with the parents. So the parents know what's going on too. So that way they have all the tools are pretty easy to access. And it's all free, right? You don't have to. Zoom, I pay a small fee per month, but YouTube and Google Docs, it's all free, right? And they're very robust. So I just keep it simple. I don't really do anything out of that. I think that those are just great tools to leverage.
Great. Gus, you also spoke about your experience with GRE, and you wanted to touch upon something. You can probably we can talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. So the GRE is an adaptive test, right? I also took the GMAT too. I didn't go to business school, but I was kind of curious about the GMAT, and I tutored for the GMAT. And actually, there's a local college called Menlo College. It's more for it's students who can't get into competitive schools, but they want a private environment. They go there, and I've taught GMAT classes there because they're businesses. So I took the GMAT, which is adapted by question, which really makes it hard. But the GRE is adapted by section, just like the new SAT is going to be. And what it means is that you got to be on fire in the beginning. Like if you have any anxiety, like that's not going to be good, right? If you feel really nervous, and when you feel nervous and you feel scared, you can't think straight. You're gonna make mistakes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what happens if you miss the first, especially on the GMAT, if you miss the first few questions, the questions get easier, and then all of a sudden you're a lower score. But for the GRE and the new SAT, yeah, like you need that first section has to be really, really good. Fortunately, you can skip around, so that's what I kind of tell my students. Like, and I'm gonna, because I've tutored for the GRE, and now I'm going to be tutoring these high school students for the new SAT. I'm going to tell them, like, look, some of you don't know, don't worry, skip it, come back to it. You can move around a little bit, but it's going to be very imperative that they're very calm at the beginning and they're not nervous. Because if you have kids who are incredibly anxious, and there are a lot of kids who have diagnosed anxiety disorder, and it's high here in the Bay Area. It's incredibly high. And that's we could talk hours about that. Why that is. It could be parent driven. It could be society driven. I don't know exactly the right answer to that question, but the bottom line is a lot of people have a lot of anxiety. Like in my school alone, we have like 15, 20% of our students who have some sort of a learning plan in place because of some sort of anxiety disorder or something similar to that. And so, I don't know like how to solve that. Like I wish I had a silver bullet. I mean, if I knew how to get rid of a kid's anxiety right away, I would do motivational talks, charge $1 million per speech or event. I don't know. It's a $1 million question. It's so hard to figure out. But I think a lot of it's going to be, I feel like I have a calm presence. I try to present myself. I think that's why I've been in this field for so long. If I was an anxious person, I don't think I would just survive as an educator. Practice, you do more and more practice. And a lot of times, if this is also a tricky one, but if the parents are very anxious, that makes my job incredibly difficult. Like sometimes if I'm like 2 or 3 minutes running behind schedule, all of a sudden the parent texts me really fast, like, where are you? Like, hey, calm down, relax, take it easy. I don't know how to solve that because you got to be careful with those kind of conversations. But a lot of times, if I know the parent's going to be very anxious, then I'll just deal with the kid directly and kind of keep the parent out of it sometimes and say, hey, let's just communicate, and I'll give your mom or dad an update to kind of remove that element. But I think whatever you have to do, and some people might have their own techniques, and I'm all ears. If you'll, after this podcast want to share what they've done to help. But I think that the anxiety is going to be a big one because if people are really anxious and they struggle in that first section, they're going to have a low score, right? Because then the next section is going to be easier questions, but it means that they're at a lower score level, right? So that's that. I think that's going to be that's going to be a game changer for the new SAT, and it's a short test, which is good. I mean, at least it's not going to be as mentally draining as, especially for kids who have extended time because they're there for 4.5 to 5 hours. That'll be shorter, which is good. But it's absolutely imperative that they, right out of the gate, they start strong, and that's something I'm going to have to really that's going to be different how I go about my test prep going forward with the new SAT. They have to be strong right from the beginning.
Great stuff, Gus. Thank you so much. I think now we can move on to those rapid fire sort of questions. Not really rapid fire, but listicle sort of questions.
Yeah, sure.
So you'll see me pause before every question. I just have to click on a button here. So some of the questions that I already have in my mind are, okay, this is my first question. What would you advise teachers that are starting out as, private tutors as far as the test prep is concerned, in terms of two things? One is getting more students, and one is succeeding at doing the job.
Great question. One of my colleagues who just left the teaching profession, she's just wants to kind of do something else, and she was interested in tutoring. I told her, don't sell yourself short. Definitely. If you haven't done much tutoring, you might say, well, maybe I'll charge like a lower rate. Like, no, like you have experience. So I think just have faith in yourself that you know this because you have taught. You're not like someone fresh out of college that's green. So I think don't sell yourself short. That's absolutely important. And some things I mentioned earlier in terms of like how to get started. I mean, a lot of times it's just whatever network you have, or connecting with other tutors. Sometimes it might be good to connect with like college counselors. Actually, I didn't talk. I'm surprised I haven't talked about that until now. But linking with college counselors is a huge marketing technique. I've worked with several private college counselors. Some of my former clients, once their kids were out of the house, they wanted to get into the college counseling because they realize, well, I could do this. I help my kids get into college, and I can make money doing it. So I think, connecting with people who talk to students who would need your services, right? Because if you're a college counselor and you're working with a kid, like, oh, you might need to take this. Oh, I know of a tutor who could work with you. Oh, you our grades are low. You might need to bring your grades up. I got a tutor who can help you because you're going to need good grades if you want to get into this college. So I think making those connections is huge. And the first place I worked at when I was or the first tutoring center when I was a grad student at Stanford, they were really a college counseling company, and they would have tutoring as one of their side businesses. And so, yeah, I mean, that's huge. You got to connect with the right people, but also just have faith in yourself that, don't sell yourself short. Don't charge an obscene amount, but make sure you're, because when you do charge a slightly higher rate, people know that you're pretty serious. Okay, why would this person charge that rate? And I've heard about through other people, this is going to be a good person I'm going to work with.
Good. And you spoke about, interacting with the parents and students, sometimes if you've got anxious parents and stuff like that, right? From that aspect, I'm not talking about the teaching skills here, which tutors are going to be good at, but from other things in terms of communication, what are some of the things that a tutor can keep in mind? Some of the things that are underrated, or some of the things that are overrated. But what are the right things to do to kind of keep the relationship smooth with the parents and students?
I would say just be highly organized and communicate well. Communication is actually key. For example, when my wife and I just got married, we got a dog, and we had a dog trainer. But I loved how she gave us an email after every training session and told us what we needed to do, because there's so much, and I couldn't remember everything. And I'm dealing with other stuff. My wife paid closer attention than I did, but that helped a lot. And I didn't quite do that with my students from time to time, especially if it was academic. I just say, okay, see you later. I'll see you next week. Test prep, I would give them homework to do, and I'd kind of write it in their binder. But I didn't do an email. But the things that when you email, and kids don't really read emails so much, but I'll send text reminders. Hey, make sure you check your email because there's a homework that I sent your way. You got to be highly organized because you just forget, and you need that record too. And so when you have a record of it, I think the parents kind of like the fact that, okay, everything's documented. Here's what you did. And also keeping the parents in the know, even if they may not be home when you're doing the session, or maybe you haven't communicated with them in a while, or talk to them directly. I guess that's why I mean communicate. But as long as you email and CC the parents, so I think that's part of the communication organization. Absolutely critical because it's you really want to make sure that you can easily follow what you're doing.
Right. Gus, sometimes tutors can be really enthusiastic when they're starting out, and communication with parents can go a little up and down. What are some of the things that you'd say never say these things to the parents?
Yeah, I would say, how the parents' anxiety can really ruin the kids. I want to bring that up. I struggle with that question because I'm actually very transparent. And I'll tell them if they ask what are some of the horror stories you've seen, I'll tell them some of the and a lot of times just life happens. Things happen with these kids, and there's certain reasons why kids may not do well. If a parent asks why some kids have not done well, look, there was a death in the family, or I had one kid actually got into a car accident right the day before the test. Another one, his girlfriend broke up with him, was in tears. Those kids did fine actually, but I'd be super transparent. Things happen, but in terms of what I wouldn't tell them, sometimes the parents can really hurt the kid, especially if they're if the parent's going through a divorce and it's really nasty, and they're being kind of selfish about it and not thinking about the kids first. I've seen that really in the classroom and in tutoring. And so sometimes I don't want to bring up to the parents because I don't know what they might be going with. The anxiety is a big one though, because some parents who are incredibly anxious. I mean, you're living in that house with a kid, right? The kid's going to see that. That's hard. I mean, it's and I'm sure it's every fast. Maybe they get anxious when it's breakfast time, and anxious in the middle of the day. So that's something I don't bring up so much, and I'll just kind of see for myself and observe if that's happening. but it's rare. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, I'm very transparent with the parents. I try to be as honest as I can be. I mean,
Right.
there's no reason to BS or lie to them.
Got it.
I want to be totally honest, and if and I'm not gonna always say things are going like I'll tell them like if things are not going well, I'm gonna tell you right away, like
Right,
like
right.
hey, your kid's not doing the work, or like they're not engaged, and if it means I lose the business, that's fine,
Yeah,
because I
yeah.
don't want to create a bad name for myself where I just work with families and we don't get anywhere.
Gus, as much as it is them choosing tutors, sometimes tutors also have to choose their students, right? I
Mhm.
mean, would you list any number of red flags for tutors to watch out for?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And I know there was one tutor that worked in the area, and she screened her students. Like she had them do and if you didn't meet a certain threshold, she would not work with you. And I thought that was kind of weird because, yeah, obviously you're gonna have great numbers because you're working with strong students, right? But she had a point that, like, well, look, I don't want to work with you if you have very weak math skills because you're not going to probably get to a certain level. I mean, it's probably not worth your while. Like, like if you're thinking of getting to like a top tier school and you don't really have the wherewithal, yeah, I mean, this is probably you need to have more honest conversation with yourself. And so I think those would be red flags for sure. Like if I have a student that's doing like algebra 2 as a junior, where some kids do it as a freshman, and they're getting C's in that class, yeah, that would be kind of a red flag in the sense that they're probably not going to do well on the test because they just don't have a strong. Um, Also, the kids who are just super busy. I think that's another red flag too, where parents kind of overcommit their kids. I think that's a big one too, because are they really going to put in the time? Like I always ask that question: what things are your kids doing? If they're saying they're playing water polo and they're, water polo is a big sport around here, and they're going to be traveling, I say, you know what? Let's wait till after the season's over then. Let's
Right.
so they can put more time, right? So that, but if it's to say, oh, they have this, they do robotics, they're in the drama school play. That's tricky. And then I think the other red flag too is how the parents are. If the parents we call them helicopter parents, where they're hovering all the time. And I've had some of my counterparts or other friends who tutor who I may have given them business, and they'll reach out to me like, I'm not comfortable working with this family because the
Right.
mom is just really driving me nuts.
Right.
I'll take it on because I could, if I have a relationship and I could deal with it. Sometimes I'll say, well, let me see if I can, I'm okay with it because I have the patience to deal with. But those are red flags too. If you have a parent who seems a little too involved and doesn't quite let their kid, because these kids are almost adults, right? I mean, if they're 17, 18 years old, they're going to be on their own. They can't always have mom and dad be
Yeah.
there from the whole time. You have to slowly let go, right? So I think those are red flags for sure.
Got it, Gus. Thank you so much. That was like super helpful. Gus, as a test prep tutor, what are the immediate tech challenges you're looking to solve?
Yeah, I did. Actually, no, that has some other challenges. I brought the tech challenges. So that's a good one. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, I haven't really had issues with Zoom so much or Wi-Fi. I think that's been for the most part fine. I mean, there have been some instances when there's bad weather and you lose internet connection. But yeah, I haven't really run into that so much. I would say maybe just making sure that whatever work I'm giving the kids, are they actually doing it, and coming up with a tech solution there. Um, Actually, I mean, now this just popped in my head, and this is we could have a much deeper conversation about this down the road about AI. Are kids going to be using AI to do their work for them? Um, like, I'll kind of go back several years where I suspected, and it doesn't happen too often, but sometimes I suspect the kid might be cheating on their homework. Not in the classroom, but well, it happens in the classroom too, but test prep wise, because
Right.
they're not getting a grade, right? Like, there's no reason to cheat on your SAT homework if you're not getting questions right. That's good. Then I'd say, I need to know so I can help you, right? But I think sometimes they're ashamed or afraid. They want to show to their parents that they're doing well. And so I had one kid was getting every question right. I was like, "There's no way you're getting every question right." And so I think what he was doing, he was looking at the answers in the back of the book or looking up the answers online. And I think that's probably going to be the next thing with ChatGPT and other regenerative AI platforms, where and that's fine. Like, if you put in a question, you're not sure about something, but maybe that's a tech challenge. But I mean, I think that's just a greater conversation you have to have with your students and families. Like, hey, this is a great resource, but it's a responsible use of technology. You're only cheating yourself if you're going to do your homework this way. Like, don't do it to appease me. If you feel like you don't want to do this, it's fine. Let's not do this. We don't have to do this test prep. It's totally okay. But you're only, like, if I'm working with a personal trainer, if I don't do my exercise, I'm just gonna be honest. Like, I didn't do the exercises, and they're gonna tell. And if I can't do a certain activity, and same thing with the kids. Like, I'm gonna know. Like, fine, you got all the questions. Okay, then show me to do this question. They can't do it. Like, how do you get all these questions right? So I think just that might be with ChatGPT. Just if kids might abuse it. I think that's something that just kind of popped in my head that could be a problem.
Got it, Gus. Gus, I've covered pretty much all the questions that I wanted to talk to you about.
Excellent.
But then, I've got new questions that have come out of this podcast, which maybe, we'll come back to you for part 2 if you're available.
Yeah, we should. This is fun. I enjoyed it.
Great, Gus. Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much
Likewise.
again.